Icarus and his father Daedalus were imprisoned on the island of Crete. Daedalus, a master inventor, built wings made of feathers and wax so they could fly away from the island. He warned Icarus not to fly too high or too low. But Icarus, being young and reckless, soared too close to the sun. The wax melted, and he fell into the sea and drowned. This Greek myth proves that even in the 5th century before Christ, man was dreaming of flying. It would only take 2,500 years for that dream to become reality. So let us take off on a journey of discovery. But first, please crash into the like button and subscribe so that you can wing your way back here for new content. Leonardo da Vinci sketched flying machines centuries ahead of his time. He looked at birds of prey and studied their methods for gliding so gracefully. But it wasn't until the 19th century that flight finally became achievable. Otto Lilienthal of Germany made over 2,000 flights in the 1890s. His gliders looked similar to some of da Vinci's designs, and they sometimes allowed him to glide for up to 250 meters. He risked his life in the name of science and innovation. Unfortunately, he fell from one of his gliders, injuring his spine and dying 2 days later. Despite this, his work inspired a pair of bicycle mechanics from Ohio. In 1903, Wilbur and Orville Wright made history. Their powered aircraft, the Wright Flyer, lifted off the sandy dunes of Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. It flew for just 12 seconds, covering 120 feet, which is shorter than the wingspan of a modern Boeing 747. But it was enough to change everything. And they didn't just fly. The Wright brothers figured out how to actually control their machine, how to turn, tilt, and stay balanced. So for the first time, humans controlled powered, sustained flight. The sky was no longer the limit. It wasn't long before passenger flights became available, the first of which occurred in Florida in 1914. A Mr. Abram C. Field, former mayor of St. Petersburg, paid $400 at auction for the ticket. In today's money, that's over $10,000. Only a few months later, airplanes were at war. In World War I, planes started as scouts. They were used for reconnaissance and photographing enemy lines. But soon they became deadly weapons. Pilots sometimes carried pistols or rifles, and would literally shoot at each other by hand. Their planes were often made of wood, fabric, and wire, very flimsy, like this French Blériot 11, which was tiny and slow, barely reaching 50 miles per hour. It was the first mono-wing plane, with all of the other planes of that era being bi-wings. The war's dogfights, bombing runs, and need for air superiority changed the rules of combat. Technology raced forward. Better engines, faster designs, more deadly potential, resulting in planes like the British Sopwith Camel, a famous fighter which was very agile but tricky to fly. After the war, aviation entered the golden age. Pilots became performers, wowing crowds with their stunts. Air mail routes made communications far easier, and short hauls evolved into far-reaching intercontinental passenger flights. In 1927, Charles Lindbergh made the first solo nonstop flight across the Atlantic, from New York to Paris. His plane, the Spirit of St. Louis, was built without a front windshield. Instead of looking straight ahead, Lindbergh had to look out a tiny side window, or use a periscope, because they needed room for extra fuel tanks up front. During the trip, he was awake for more than 55 hours straight. He was hallucinating by the end from lack of sleep. Even so, he was greeted as a hero. World War II pushed aviation into overdrive. The skies were filled with aircraft, fighters, bombers, transports. The fight for air superiority was key in most battles. This made fighter planes a vital part of any country's arsenal. The Supermarine Spitfire was an iconic fighter which defended the Great British Isles during the Battle of Britain, its foe being the German Messerschmitt Bf 109. On the Eastern Front, the Russians were using their Yak-3 to defend the motherland from the Nazi invasion. And over in the Pacific, where the planes needed to launch from carrier ships, the Japanese Zero flew in many battles against the Grumman Hellcat. But a breakthrough was about to take flight: the jet engine. Germany introduced the first operational jet fighter, the Messerschmitt Me 262, which was faster and more powerful. It signaled the start of a new era. It was also a time for heavy bombers. The need to carry vast arrays of bombs created these behemoths. They would be given up to 6 large engines in order to haul the weight and cover the hundreds of miles to their bombing
1,500
zones.
miles to targets and 1,500 miles back from bases at Saipan.
The American B-29 Superfortress would deliver the final blow of the war. Once the war was over, Chuck Yeager broke the sound barrier in 1947. Over the Mojave Desert, California, his plane, the X-1, flew at Mach 1.06, or 700 miles per hour at a height of 45,000 feet. Before Yeager, people thought planes might shatter or break apart if they went that fast. It was called the sound barrier because no one knew if it could even be crossed. It was quite a feat, especially since, the night before, Yeager broke 2 ribs in a horse-riding accident. By the 1950s, jets weren't experimental or used primarily for war, they were for the public. The first commercial jet airliner was the de Havilland Comet from the United Kingdom. It was first tested in 1949 and entered service in 1952. However, the Comets had serious design flaws and tragically, a few of them broke apart mid-air. From these tragedies, engineers around the world learned huge lessons about how to safely build jet airliners. After the Comet's problems, the Boeing 707 became the first really successful commercial jetliner, launching the jet age in a big way. Flights that once took days were now completed in hours. The world got smaller. Bigger jets led to global tourism, mass business, and they helped create the modern world. Then came the Concorde, sleek, fast, and supersonic. It could fly from London to New York in under 3.5 hours. At the same time, the military pushed the envelope with aircraft like the SR-71 Blackbird, still one of the fastest planes ever built. But none were as fast as the X-15. This rocket plane hit a top speed of Mach 6.7, about 4,520 miles per hour. And it could reach a top altitude of over 62 miles up, into the edge of space. A few flights qualified as space flights. Pilots even earned astronaut wings. And some X-15 pilots, like Neil Armstrong, who later walked on the moon, used it to train for spaceflight. Today, planes are bigger, quieter, and more efficient than ever. The Boeing 737 became the best-selling airliner in history, with 11,000 being produced over 50 years. At any time during the day, around 2,000 of these massive planes are flying over our heads. The Airbus A380 became the largest passenger plane in the world. Upon entering service in 2007, some airports had to widen runways and add new gates just to handle its size. The plane can handle up to 800 passengers. Even though it's amazing, Airbus stopped making them in 2021 because airlines decided to buy smaller, more flexible jets, like the 787 or A350 instead. The A380 is huge, but the largest plane ever made is the Antonov AN225. This massive beast was the heaviest ever built, with an empty weight of 314 tons, a max takeoff weight of 710 tons, and the ability to airlift a record-setting payload of nearly 280 tons. But we will probably never see one fly again. The Russian-Ukrainian war destroyed the last of these massive relics. So what's next? Well, companies like Eviation, with their plane Alice, and others are testing fully electric commuter planes. Soon, short-haul trips may use no fuel at all, and even though the Concorde has flown its last flight, supersonic passenger services are due to return soon. Models like the Overture hope to take flight in the next few years, cutting transatlantic flights down to 3 hours. There are also plans for flying taxis that use AI systems for piloting the craft, but these innovations may be decades away. From wooden gliders to rocket ships to self-flying taxis, we've come a long way in just over 100 years. Icarus may have flown too close to the sun, but he taught us all that mankind will not be subdued by its limitations and will always rise above them.